Hello and welcome back to the Okanagan Reader. I'm your host, Jim Bowering. Today's reading is Chapter 17 of Green Comet, the first book in the Green Comet trilogy. Elgin wakes. I've known this guy for years and I can't even say his name. Elgin wakes up on day 4 feeling much better. He eats ravenously, awash in sensations. He has his first experience of iceberries. He looks at his new body in a mirror and tries out his wings. Then he and Stanton go out to explore the comet. Sounds like an interesting chapter. I wish I was hearing it for the first time. Okay. Subscribe. Like. Well, here we go then.
Chapter 17. Elgin eats and goes out. On day 4, as promised, Elgin was able to get out of bed. He woke up feeling better. He had clarity in his senses and in his thinking, sharp enough that he could now see how dull they were the day before. He hadn't felt especially dim yesterday, maybe a bit tired or confused, but close to normal he would have thought. But the new level of acuity today made him realize he thought wrongly. It also made him wonder if he was overestimating himself today, too. Stanton came in as soon as Elgin woke up, and an amazing aroma wafted in with him. The coffee struck him first, but bacon was there the next instant. He detected some kind of baking item, muffins maybe, and rounding it all out was a mysterious smell that was new to him, but seemed so familiar that it made him feel nostalgic. He was struck speechless by the power of the combined aroma, but his stomach spoke for him. It growled so loudly that Stanton heard it clearly across the room. "Well," he said, "it sounds like that's working." They were both grinning broadly. Elgin was up on his feet before he knew it. He didn't remember getting out of bed, and now he was moving toward the door, toward the source of those enticing vapors. He felt like a passenger in his own body. It was as if his stomach, still growling with anticipation, had taken over. He relaxed and enjoyed the ride. Stanton turned and went out ahead of him, and Elgin got his first good look at his wings. Folded over his back, their tips came to just past his buttocks. They were covered with fur like the rest of his body, only it was a little darker. Now that he looked at it, Elgin could see that there was a variation in the fur color everywhere. It was subtle, just enough to break up the monotony, but it made for a nice effect. The only parts of Stanton's body that weren't furry were his face around his eyes, the palms of his hands, and the soles of his feet. Elgin could just glimpse his soles as he picked up his feet while walking. Entering the anteroom was like plunging into a pool of bright light and delightful smells. Elgin's eyes closed automatically, and his nose flared, drawing in a large percentage of the air in the room. Water burst into his mouth, and he opened his eyes and walked over to the table, swallowing. The next few minutes were lost in the ecstasy of eating, punctuated by moans and sighs and other prandial sounds. The bacon was excellent. It was crisp and just like the real thing as far as he remembered. The coffee was perfect, dark and a little bitter. You had to know it was algae, or you couldn't tell. The muffins, soft and warm with faux butter, were the vehicle of Elgin's introduction to iceberries. He would love them for the rest of his life. Once the sensual rush was over, Elgin's brain kicked back in. He and Stanton had walked over to the table. Walked? In microgravity? Thinking back on it, he recognized the incongruity. Now that his gut was no longer in charge, he remembered that the walk was really a parody of walking, something like a marionette, only with sticky feet. Each foot would hold him down on the floor while he moved the other forward, then peel off with slight resistance when he picked it up. He flipped a foot up onto the other knee and peered at the sole. Other than being thicker and tougher and drier than he was used to, he couldn't see anything that would make them especially grippy. "Sette," said Stanton, leaning back, sipping coffee. "Sette, like the sheets?" "Yes, and these chairs." Elgin looked down and realized he'd been sitting comfortably on a chair without wondering how. He experimentally peeled and restuck his buttocks a few times. Then he did the same with his feet on the ice floor. "Nice," he said. "Yes," said Stanton. It was the second cohort that came up with it. It came down to heat retention. He held up a hand, its palm facing Elgin. They realized that both the thin skin and the moisture here were causing too much heat loss, so they wanted to both thicken and dry the palms and soles. But we need those for grip and traction. Right, exactly what they thought. So they needed something that would replicate that even on ice. So setae, brilliant and elegant. Right, we used to call them our gecko feet, but that's faded and we don't even think about it usually, except when someone like you is experiencing it for the first time. Elgin experimented some more and made an odd discovery. It feels new to me, but it doesn't feel unusual or unnatural. That's right, and you didn't really notice when you were walking for the first time either, did you? No, but I put that down to being madly ravenous, and maybe there were still some drugs in my system. Stanton nodded. Both true, but without the brain conditioning you would still have reacted, and you wouldn't have walked quite so naturally since you've never done it before. It was Elgin's turn to nod. Everything about it was logical, but there was still a problem. But altering the body and changing the brain, those should only be done with each person's consent. He frowned, sorting it out. The second cohort decided for the third and the third for the fourth. How did they get around that? Yes, that was a problem. They knew it was a good modification. They knew people would be glad it was done, even if they weren't asked. And they knew it was relatively minor. It doesn't really change the appearance, and it doesn't really affect a person's self-image, so they snuck it in on a technicality. A technicality? Elgin raised his eyebrows. Yes, the waiver everyone signed for the modifications they would agree to undergo, fur and cryptic genitalia, for example, used language that didn't limit it to just the examples. It seemed to allow for other procedures that would serve the same end. A technicality. Elgin's smile could be called a smirk. Yes, said Stanton, smiling back, a good old technicality. Elgin experimented with a coffee cup, seeing how well it stuck to his palm and fingers. Good choice, I think. I thought so too. It does fit the criteria, and its benefits far outweigh the minor nature of the change. They sat silently for a while, picking and nibbling at the remains of breakfast. Elgin was studying the room, whose construction was more exposed than in the bedroom, when he noticed a full-length mirror. He was staring at it, so Stanton followed his gaze. Oh yes, he said, the mirror. He rose. I'll bet you want to have a look at yourself. Elgin got up and crossed the room with him to stand in front of the mirror. The first glance took in everything. His whole body was covered with thick fur, brown with reddish highlights like his original hair. It was sleek like an otter, and looked smooth and shiny. I have a glossy coat, he told Stanton. I must be healthy. As long as you don't have a wet nose, said his minder. Elgin's eyes flicked back to his face. His nose wasn't wet. It was the same nose he had before. It, along with his cheekbones and most of his forehead, framed his eyes with bare, almost hairless skin, although he still had his eyebrows. He waggled them, eliciting a laugh from Stanton. Looking at his face, even though most of it was obscured now, he realized it was still recognizable as him. His eyes, a rich medium brown that seemed to glow, were almost the same. The pupils were a bit bigger than before, and, looking close, he thought he could see a glimmer from their tapitums. But the eyes were still his. And his mouth, with the lips that were not quite thin and not quite symmetrical, hadn't changed at all. He glanced at Stanton standing behind him, comparing their two images. The other man was well built to the point of burliness. He was about a half-head shorter with darker brown, almost black fur, which could only partially conceal a slight thickening in the torso. Elgin's gaze swept on down the stout legs to the large feet planted squarely on the floor, then back up to where the legs joined at the top. His natural inclination to not look at another man's genitals too closely was overcome by the realization that there was nothing there to look at. A spike of revulsion was followed by a flash of fear as his eyes snapped back to his own groin, which was similarly blank. At the same time his memory was trying to tell him that he was expecting this, but it's one thing to hear about cryptic genitalia, and quite another to not see your own where they ought to be. That's a bit of a shocker, isn't it? Said Stanton. No kidding, Elgin replied, his heart still fluttering. He stared for a moment longer, then disengaged, telling himself that he could finish later in private. Right now he could see what must be the points of his folded wings just peeking over his shoulders, so he turned to get a look at them. Like Stanton's, Elgin's wings were a shade darker than his overall color. Folded, they were quite flat to the back, lying in contact with it rather than standing off. They didn't overlap except at the tips. From the points at the top, they converged until they met between the shoulder blades. Then they ran straight down to the tailbone. At that point, the left tip, if he had that right at being backwards in the mirror, emerged and crossed over top of the right one. They were completely covered by fur, but it was shorter than the body fur next to it and not as thick. He guessed that was a design decision, probably to keep the weight down. They wouldn't be that heavy anyway and easy to carry around in microgravity, but you wouldn't want any unnecessary inertia to overcome when flapping them. Thinking of which, Elgin became curious about their operation. To his surprise, as soon as he thought of opening them, his wings opened. He looked the question at Stanton, who nodded, apparently more brain conditioning like the walking. Smiling, he stretched his wings all the way out, noting that the leading edge had a noticeable bend at the joint. The tips reached farther than his outstretched hands, and could be brought around to meet well above his head. He noticed that the fur on the undersides was even shorter and thinner. He could almost see skin in some places. He gave a couple of experimental flaps and was surprised when his feet separated from the floor. He was heading for the ceiling, struggling with all 6 limbs when Stanton caught him and deftly returned him to the floor. "Well, that surprised me," said Elgin. "They're more powerful than they look, aren't they?" "Yes. And the setae obviously aren't as strong as gravity. Gravity's the key. We don't have to create any lift here, so it can all go into maneuvering. Which raises a question. Why couldn't I maneuver? Why wasn't I able to catch myself and get back down?" "Brain conditioning can only do so much. You need actual experience to get any good at it." "That makes sense. I felt like a newborn calf trying to get to its feet." "You looked more like a fledgling stork falling out of its nest." "Hey!" But the image was so apropos and so funny that he had to laugh. "You'll have it in no time," said Stanton. He waved off Elgin's doubting look. "I can tell by looking at you that you're naturally athletic. You move like one. I don't know how to describe it, like a dancer or something." "I'm certainly no dancer. My aunt tried to teach me, but she gave up. She said, 'It's such a waste, you so graceful and so good-looking.'" Elgin rolled his eyes at the memory. "She said, 'Why can't you relax and let go? You could be such a good dancer, but you don't even try.'" "Why didn't you try?" "I did try." "Not hard enough for her, apparently." "I tried hard. I learned all the steps and all the moves. I could do whatever dance she wanted and never step on her feet. Her complaint was that I wasn't expressive enough. 'You dance like you're building one of your projects,' she said. 'You do all the right steps, but there's no life in it.'" "She sounds like an interesting woman." "She was. She is. She was in the theater before she married my uncle." "Ah," said Stanton. "What?" said Elgin. "Never mind. Why couldn't you be expressive?" "I tried to, but it didn't feel right." Elgin looked a little embarrassed. It felt like showing off. "But dancing is partly showing off," exclaimed Stanton. "I know, and I just can't do it." "Isn't that ironic?" said Stanton. "If ironic is the word, I'm never sure." "What?" "Well, I love dancing, but I'm lousy at it. You're good at it, but you won't do it. Is that ironic?" "Sort of. It could be." Elgin shrugged. "I don't really know." "Yeah, me neither," said Stanton. "So are you done admiring yourself in the mirror?" "I guess that's enough," Elgin said, striking a pose and giving himself a good last look. "For now." "Why?" "How do you feel about going out?" "Going out? Where?" "Not too far. I thought we could fly around a bit. Get you some exercise." "That sounds good to me. I feel like I could use it. I've been lying around doing nothing for ages." Stanton chuckled and led the way to the door. "I'll clean up later," he said as they passed the table. In a relatively confined space like the anteroom, it was more natural to keep the wings folded and walk, or at most kick and glide. When they went through the door, though, they entered a wide-open space. Stanton's wings automatically opened part way and began moving, correcting and maintaining his position and attitude. Elgin's wings also opened slightly, but not for the same reason. His arms came out too, and his feet spread and gripped the doorstep for balance. He froze in that position, staring across the corridor at the opposite wall. He was trying to quell a small rush of vertigo. "Take your time," said Stanton. "We've got all day." "It's all right. It's passing already. That's good, and about normal. It should be gone completely by the time we get back today. Elgin was able to move his gaze, and he was rewarded by the impressive size of the corridor. Making sure to not move his eyes or turn his head too quickly, he took in its dimensions. It was at least 10 meters to the ceiling, and over 15 to the far wall. He opened his senses and felt the shape, smiling with satisfaction when his innate sense of proportion told him that it was actually a bit over 16 meters, making the cross-section of the corridor fit the golden ratio. Stanton was following Elgin's thoughts as they showed in his face, and he nodded with a tight smile. Here was evidence that his new employee really did have a natural eye for the work. That told him as much as all the files he'd read. Elgin was shuffling now, looking as if he wanted to get going, so Stanton said, "I think you should just push off with your legs. Then we can get you stabilized once we're going." Elgin was surprised by how quickly he caught on. Most of the flight was spent gliding, using partially opened wings to steer, with the occasional flap to keep the speed up. It wasn't long before he began experimenting, making slow, sweeping turns back and forth, and long, undulating waves up and down. He opened his wings, grabbing lots of air to slow down, then gave a couple of sharp thrusts to get back up to speed. It wasn't perfect, of course. A few times he ended up tumbling out of control, and Stanton needed to intervene to stabilize him. And the one time he tried a roll, by the time he was on his back he was disoriented and flung out his wings to stop it. Stanton tried to explain while he helped him right himself. No one's quite sure, but the consensus is that our sense of up and down is pretty strongly ingrained from evolving in gravity, and even though we only have visual cues for that here, we still have the instinct for it. Okay. So, even though it shouldn't make any difference which way you're oriented, you still think one way is up and the other is down. That is definitely true. Until you get used to it, your brain won't process what you see as efficiently when you're upside down, so things won't look right. Yeah, that's what happened. I couldn't tell where I was anymore. Exactly. You'll get used to it, though. All it takes is a bit of time. Surprisingly little time when you think about it. Okay. Elgin gave a few flaps and set off again, right side up. Stanton effortlessly matched his pace. After another few hundred meters, Stanton gestured ahead and said, "We'll take the right fork up there." "Okay," said Elgin. "Are we going someplace in particular?" "Yes, there's something I want to show you." "Oh yeah? What?" "You'll see." "Secret, eh?" "I want you to get the full effect of it when you first see it. I don't want to spoil it by talking about it too much." "Oh," Elgin said, more curious than ever. "Is it something you built? Some engineering feat?" "You'll see." He led Elgin around the corner and slowed down. They both drifted to a near stop while Elgin tried to take in what he was seeing. At first he couldn't grasp the scale of it. He could see that it appeared to be a sphere made of ice, and he could tell that it was big, but for a few seconds he was not able to see how big. Finally the cues began to register. He could roughly estimate the size of the chamber containing the sphere by comparing it to the size of the corridor, and he could see the mouth of another corridor in one of the chamber's walls. "Is that thing 100 meters across?" "Yes, it is," said Stanton, sounding pleased. Elgin could see right through it and out the other side, so the ice was remarkably clear, but by the nature of the refraction he could tell that it wasn't solid. "You built a big hollow sphere of ice. Why?" "It wasn't just me," insisted Stanton. "There were a few of us working on it." "But it was your idea, right? And most of the engineering was your work?" "Well, yes." Stanton was getting uncomfortable. "But that's not why I brought you here." They moved toward the sphere. "Let me take you inside." Elgin caught up and they cruised part way around the outside until they came to the entrance. Stanton stopped and bowed Elgin in, following close behind. It was even more impressive inside. Looking straight across you couldn't see the far wall. The ice was too clear and the angle of incidence too close to 90 degrees. Once your line of sight moved off the perpendicular, though, there was a steady progression of increasingly distorted images until they disappeared and were replaced by reflections. "Stay here," Stanton said as he headed across. "No, right up against the wall. Good. Don't move." He turned and flew quickly to the opposite side, where he put his head close to that wall. Elgin heard something that sounded like whispering. "Elgin," it said. "Can you hear me?" Elgin looked around, but he couldn't tell where it was coming from, although it sounded as if it was right beside him. "Stanton?" he said. "Yes, can you understand me?" "Yes, can you hear me too?" "Whisper instead. It works better." "Okay, like this?" "That's it. So what do you think?" "It's fantastic. You've built the largest ice whispering gallery ever made. I'll bet people have a lot of fun here." "They do. Meet me in the middle." He pushed away from his wall, and Elgin followed suit. He was waiting at the center when the younger man arrived. "Okay," he said. "Tell me what you think." "Like I said, it's fantastic." "No, as an engineer." "Oh." Elgin felt trapped. He looked everywhere except into the senior engineer's eyes. "Don't worry, Elgin, I know where the flaws are. You're not going to hurt my feelings." Stanton put a hand on his shoulder. "I need to know how good your special talent is, what you can see in something I'm intimately familiar with." He patted the shoulder. "This is a test, Elgin." "Okay," said Elgin. He didn't have to take any time to look at it. Anything he might have missed when he first saw it, he picked up when they entered. "There's only one thing. The entrance." "Only one?" "Right. Are you sure?" Elgin looked at him. "It's not a question of being sure or not. Once I know, I just know." He shrugged. "I'm sorry." Stanton nodded and clapped the shoulder. He was smiling. "Don't be sorry. Tell me what's wrong with the entrance." "It's not very, mathematical. I mean, I could do the math if I had to, but it hits me more physically at first." "Just give it to me however it is. We can do the math later." "Okay." Elgin brought his hands up and used them to indicate the roundness of the sphere. "The walls flow smoothly. Their lines are all even, very well arranged. But there's a kink at the entrance. There's a knot in the lines there." "A knot?" "Yes, the stress lines are very smooth and symmetrical everywhere else, but at the entrance the flow is disrupted." "The flow," Stanton mused. "You know, I've always known there was something wrong with the entrance." "It's nothing serious. It's structurally fine." "I know. I wouldn't let people use it otherwise. But that entrance has always bothered me, and now I know why. It doesn't flow." He grinned at Elgin. "It's not a problem. People can still use it." "Yes, they can, but it will niggle at me." He frowned at the offending portal. "We've got to fix it," he said, looking at his young companion. "What would you recommend?" Elgin frowned at it, turned and looked at the opposite wall. "It's not attached to anything, is it?" "No, floating free, kept from wandering by jets of air." "It's a nice effect." That was the idea, to emphasize the ballness of it. "I'm sorry," said Elgin, "but I think it can only be fixed by anchoring it." Stanton nodded. "I kind of thought that. It's too bad, but it's probably for the best. It's pretty high maintenance the way it is now." He pointed by tipping his head, and Elgin noticed that the wingtop on the same side joined in the motion. He found that fascinating, but his boss was talking. "We might as well anchor it right there and incorporate the doorway into it, eh?" "Yes, but—" Elgin tipped his head at the other wall, and he tried moving his wing, too. "We should replicate it over there. That way the lines can flow more symmetrically." "Well, the lines must flow." "Yes, and it's probably prudent to have a second exit, too." "That's a good point." Stanton clapped his hands. "But tomorrow is soon enough for that. Right now I want to show you why I really brought you here." "You had an even more ulterior motive?" "Yes, Elgin, I brought you here to exercise," he said, sweeping his arm at the abundance of space. "There's plenty of room for all the mistakes you want to make in here." "I can see that." Elgin spread his wings and used them to rotate, taking it in. "Are there any particular exercises I should be doing?" "Not at all. Just fly around. Try things out." And that's what he did. A few powerful thrusts propelled him toward the far wall, and he was able to turn before running into it, although awkwardly. He skimmed around the inside of the curve, fine-tuning his directional controls until he came to the opening. There he turned as hard as he could to head back to the center, where Stanton still waited, watching him. With some strong back thrusts, he came to a stop in front of his friend, with only a little adjustment necessary to find the correct position. "That could use some work," he said. Not much, though, said Stanton. I told you you're a natural, and I was right. Like a dancer, laughed Elgin, flapping away to enjoy some more of this experience. He tried everything he could think of. He saw how fast he could go, how quickly he could stop, how tight a turn could be. He tried the air in every quadrant of the sphere. At one point, he cruised by Stanton on his back, ankles crossed, hands clasped behind his head. That earned him a grin and a smack with a wing. It was after he executed his third Immelman turn, doing it just about as well as he could without the help of gravity, that he began to feel the effects of all the strenuous activity. He was getting tired and sore in muscles he didn't recall ever noticing before. He pulled up to Stanton, puffing a little. I was wondering how long you could keep it up. That feels very strange. I'm tired where I've never been tired before. He gently rotated his wing joints, wincing slightly. If it makes you feel any better, I've never seen anyone do so much or do it so well the first time. Yeah, I'm a natural. Elgin looked around. This is a great place you built, Stanton. It's just the sort of thing someone like me needs. Did you build it just for wakers? No, it was built for something else. This is just a beneficial side effect. Something else? What? It's an arena for a game we play. It's a team sport, and we have leagues and all, but everybody plays it sometime in their life, even if it's just packs of kids in the corridors. It sounds interesting. What's it called? It's called flashball. There's a game this evening if you're interested. Sure, I'd love to. Right then, it's a date. But now let's get back. I want to check you out, see how you held up to all this. I'm fine. I just got tuckered out, that's all. He shook his head vigorously and smiled. And you were right. The vertigo's gone. Good. But we have to check you out anyway. I plan on putting you to work tomorrow, and I want to be sure you're up to it. Work? I can hardly wait. Tell me more about this flashball. They headed back engrossed in talk, Stanton illustrating it with broad arm gestures.